much. The next way is doing the intercepts. The last way, and this kind of gets into stuff we're doing on Monday, but I got to do it all at once because it's going to bug me if I don't, is y equals mx plus b. All right, so y equals mx plus b. Anytime you're given an equation in math or science, I'd always write down whatever the variable means, especially in science classes, because then when you're doing the word problems, you know what each variable means. So here, m is our slope, which we haven't talked about yet. We got to talk about that first. We know what b is. We just haven't given it a letter. B is the y-intercept. B is the y-intercept. Okay, so that's the letter we associate with the y-intercept. The x and y, we have talked about too. It is any point on that line, right? Because x and y create a point. So the x and y end up being any point on that line. So we're going to use y equals mx plus b to graph, but first we haven't talked about slope yet, so let's talk about slope. Oh, I took away all of it. I cannot draw straight on this computer. Yeah. All right, so slope. What slope is? Slope is the same thing as the rate of change. It's a word that associates with the rate of change. So what that means is how much, for every one that I'm going to the right, how much am I going up? For every one that I'm going to the right, how much am I going up? Or how much am I going down? So it's a rate of change. The rate of change stays constant throughout the same thing, okay? For every one that I go up, it goes up a little bit. It does that same rate the entire line. So here, when we look at this, the slope is, you remember what the slope's defined by? Rise over run. Yes, that's what I was looking for. Rise over run. So the rise is how much it goes left and or up and down. Rise, sorry, up and down. The run is how much it goes to the right. So what I'm going to do here, if I'm ever looking at a graph and I'm trying to find the slope, I start at the furthest leftmost point. Our brains work when we read left to right. So start at the left point and work to the right. So if I start here, the rise, I'm going to try to work up to here. So I'm going to work up and I go up 1, 2, 3 spots, right? To be even with that one. So that's my rise. I rose 3. And then my run is going to be to get over to that point. I go over 1, 2, 3, 4. So my rise over run, the way I'd write the slope is 3 over 4. Because I rose 3 and went to the right 4. All right, so on a graph, start on the leftmost point and then work towards that other one by going up or down, then to the right to get to it. Okay, I always say the rise is up or down, the run is always to the right. Okay, because you want to start on the left, so you work to the right. To get down, it's positive if you go up, and it's going to be a negative number if you go down. If that makes sense. All right, so now, instead of having to draw a graph and look at the slope and do that all the time, let's find algebraically how they find it. So if I look at the rise goes along with which axis?
Y.
The y-axis, right? So really what I'm doing is I'm figuring out how much the difference is from here to here. What's the difference from this point to this point? So what I do to find that is I'm going to do what they say, find the change in y's. Change in y's, which is really just change means difference, which difference means subtract. So I'm going to take the first y point minus the second y point. That's what these little 1s and 2s mean. I mean, there's 2 different y points. Let me label these. So that -4, 0, and this one's 0, 3. So you have 2 different points here. You have this point and this point. So you have the first y and the second y. So that's why they have the 2 and the 1 right there. All right, so now on the other side, the run, which axis does it go along with? The x's. So I'm trying to figure out the difference from here to here. So what I do here is I find the change in x's. So there's 2 different x's, and I subtract them. So this one gives me the rise, how much is going up or down. This one gives me the run, how much is going to the right. And this is how we find m algebraically. So you might as well know this formula. Really, there's not. You don't have to memorize y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. You just remember that you're subtracting the y's on top and you're subtracting the x's on the bottom. All right, so again, we'll do this so we don't have to graph these. So if I had the points 2, 3, and negative 3, 8, let's find the slope given just the 2 points. I could graph these 2 points and then count, but that's going to take way too long. So let's use this formula that we have right here. Here, the easiest way to do it is just label it. I have an x and then a y. Another one, I have an x and then a y. So then this is my first x and y. This is my second x and second y. So now I can just plug it in. So y sub 2 is 8 minus y sub 1, which is 3. X sub 2 is negative 3 minus x sub 1, which is 2. So I have 5 over negative 5. Which is 5 divided by negative 5 is what? Negative 1. All right, now on slope world, in slope world, we always want it in fractions so we can think about what's happening here. So you can write any whole number over 1, right? So negative 1 over 1. So what this means is, since it's negative, this one means I'm going down 1 and to the right 1. So the top number, it's positive, I go up. It's negative, I go down. The bottom number tells me how much I'm going to the right. So anytime you see slope, automatically be thinking what it does. So when you get to graphing here in a minute, it doesn't look that bad. All right, so same thing here. You have the first x, the first y, second x, and the second y. So you subtract your y's, 6 minus negative 5. Then you subtract your x's, negative 2 minus negative 3. So here you got to be careful with your signs on these. So you do 6 minus negative 5 and negative 2 minus negative 3. So remember, these become plus. So 6 plus 5 is 11. Negative 2 plus 3 is 1 again, right? So what does this mean? This one means I'm going up 11 because it's positive, and then to the right 1.
Back to where you're supposed to graph the equation. You said just basically plug in zeros.
For your x and your y.
If it comes out as a fraction, you can't put it on the graph. Just, what's the easiest to do? Just go up and down the number, try 1, and try 2.
Yeah, what's your problem?
It's just y equals 4x plus 2. See what you can come up with that.
You can plug in 0. Oh wait, you would for the x, wouldn't you? Yeah, you would for the x. Yeah, you do for the x. Or when you plug a 0 in for the y. Sorry. Just pick a different number for x and it will work.
Okay.
Because if you pick a number for the y, you have to worry about the dividing that 4 out.
Okay.
Yeah, some of them you just got to play with. Some of them are a pain because of that. All right, so slope, you're doing the difference of the y's and the difference of, divided by the difference in the x's. There are 4 different kinds of slope. We talked about 2 of them. There's positive and negative slope. Where do I want to write this? Yeah, we go here. So 4 kinds of slope. All right, so we've talked about positive slope. Positive slope, you go up for the number if it's positive. The word I always think about is that it's rising. Okay, it's rising from left to right. Look at these from left to right. So I always start over here and it's going up from left to right. The other slope we've talked about is the negative slope, which it is falling from left to right. Okay, so from start over here, it's falling as it goes. So the two other ones. Let's solve a couple more of these. What if I have this right here? All right, so again, we do x1, y1, and then we do x2, y2. So you subtract the y's, you do 6 minus 6. On the bottom, you subtract the x's, you do x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So negative 2 minus 3. So 6 minus 6 becomes 0. Negative 2 minus 3 becomes negative 5. What is 0 divided by any number? 0. So my slope here is 0. But what's this really mean? This means that I'm going down 0 and to the right 5. Okay, well, how's that work? So if I go to my graph up here, I'm going to just start at one of these points. So if I start at negative 2, 6, say it's right here. If I go from that point and I go down 0 and to the right 5, I would just go to the right 5, really. So that makes a horizontal line. Okay, so that makes a horizontal line. So when my slope is 0, I will always get a horizontal line. Always get a horizontal line. Now the next two that we're doing are a little bit odd man outs, so let's go ahead and write an equation for these. So here, if I asked you, if on this, just looking at these points right here, when x is 3, what is my graph at? What is my graph? What is y at? When x is 3, what's y at? 6. When x is negative 2, what's my graph at? So what do you think when x is 100, what do you think my graph's at? Y is 6. So when x is negative 100, y is 6. So no matter where x is, y is always equal to 6. So to write the equation of this line, it would just be y equals 6. So we'll talk more about that in just a second. But basically, whenever you have y equals a number, it will always give you a horizontal line. So your slope will be 0, and it'll always give you a horizontal line. All right, our last type of graph. So again, we're working these. We have x1, y1, x2, y2. So you have negative 1 minus 6 over negative 2 minus negative 2. So negative 1 minus 6 is negative 7. Add these up and I get 0. So what is any number divided by 0? No. 0 divided by any number is 0.
Undefined.
It is undefined. Do that in the calculator and it will say error. Okay. So any number divided by 0 is undefined. So our slope here is undefined. Well, what does that mean? So here, let's go ahead and look at it. This means down 7 and to the right 0. So again, let me just start at one of these points. If I start at negative 2, 6. So negative 2, 6. If I go down 7 and to the right 0, if I keep going down 7 to the right 0, what kind of line does that make? It makes a vertical line. So here, yes, my slope is undefined. And it will always give me a vertical line. All right, so let's go back and think about this one. Let's think about my y. So when y is 6, what is x? When y is 6, what is x? When y is negative 7, what is x? When y is 100, what is x? So x equals negative 2 no matter what y is. So x equals a number will always give me a vertical line, and the slope is undefined. So those are kind of the odd ones out here. The way I kind of think about it, just to help you remember the slope wise, is if you're going up a mountain, it's positive. If you're going down a mountain, it's negative. If you're falling, if you're going flat ground, you're not rising or falling, so it's 0. And then if you fall off a cliff, you die and become undefined. So stupid, but it helps you remember. So vertical line, undefined, horizontal line is 0. All right, so let's go write those out for a second since we have those now. A horizontal line A horizontal line is always y equals, actually it's always y equals your y-intercept. Y equals any number. So I'm going to write next to this. Y equals any number will always give you a horizontal line and your slope will be 0. A vertical line is always x equals some number, any number, and my slope will be undefined. So here's the easiest way to do that. If I had to graph a couple of these, if I had to graph x equals 3, the easiest way to remember that, okay, so x equals 3, you all know that x equals 3 is at that point right there, right? But now I got to remember it's some kind of line. So if I draw a line this way, will it make any sense? If I put a line right here, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to put a line there. So it's got to be this way. Same thing with the y. If it's y equals -8, I come down here to -8. I know that's y equals -8 down here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So y equals -8 is down here. So I put my point. Would it make any sense to draw it this way? No. So it's got to go this way. So it does kind of.
I understand that you figure that x equals 3. And then what do you do? I mean, we know x, the x-axis, but how do you come up with the y?
It doesn't ever cross the y. How do I get a point over here, you mean?
Yeah, like that.
Well, basically, it's kind of what I was saying earlier. If here, I know x equals 3 is right here. So when y is 0, x is equal to 3. If y is 10, what does x equal? 3. If y is -10, what does x equal? 3. Right, same thing here. If x equals 0, I get y equals -8. X equals 100, I still have y equals -8. So no matter where I go on there, y is always equal to -8. So it stays on that line. Really, the easiest thing to remember, though, is just kind of remember if x equals a number is a vertical line, y equals a number is a horizontal line. And then, of course, they will ask you about your slope on these. So my slope here is undefined, and my slope here is 0. All right, so the last thing from slope before we graph a couple in the next section